Hey, this is Professor Smith. Sorry I can't be there today with you guys, but I want you guys to see my face so you know what I look like. Chup, pay attention. Billings, pay attention.
October 3rd, 1951. The New York Giants face off against the Brooklyn Dodgers in the deciding game in a tied series for the National League pennant. Bottom of the ninth inning, down by 2 runs with runners on second and third, 1 out. Bobby Thompson steps up to the plate.
Brooklyn leads it 4-2. 1 out, last of the ninth. Flacco pitches. Bobby Thompson takes a strike call on the inside corner. Bobby hitting at .292. Flacco throws. There's a long strike. It's going to be, I believe, the Giants won the pennant. 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 Bobby Thompson hits into the very back of the left field stand. The Giants won the pennant, and they're going crazy. They're going crazy.
Bobby Thompson's shot heard around the world may have been the greatest moment in all of baseball, America's pastime, a game started back in the 1800s, and America's first professional sport. While Abner Doubleday is usually credited with the creation of baseball in 1839, the first rules of baseball were written in 1845 by a New York baseball club, the Knickerbockers. Alexander Cartwright, the author, is commonly referred to as the father of baseball. May 4th, 1869. The Cincinnati Red Stockings play the first professional baseball game in a 45-9 win over the Great Westerns of Cincinnati. Between 1845 and 1869, players were mainly amateurs who played only in their own city. The Red Stockings played nationally and posted a 65-0 record in 1869, the only perfect record in baseball history. The first attempt at forming a major league was the National Association of Professional Baseball Players, which lasted from 1871 to 1875. In 1876, a more structured league, the National League, was formed. The National League is the oldest surviving major league, and its counterpart, the American League, was founded in 1901. The National Agreement of 1903 formalized relations between the two leagues and signaled the advent of the World Series, which pits the two league champions against each other. Baseball became increasingly profitable as its popularity grew, which led to disputes between the players and owners over income distribution and control. These disputes culminated in 1919 with the Black Sox scandal, in which members of the Chicago White Sox conspired to throw the 1919 World Series. This scandal led to the formation of a new National Commission of Baseball and its commissioner, which oversees both leagues and brought them closer. Before 1920, most baseball was played with scrappy, scratch-for-runs play. This era, known as the dead ball era, ended in 1920 with multiple rule changes that made it more advantageous for hitters. This resulted in more runs and sluggers, players who hit for power, than before. This era saw the rise of perhaps the most famous player in all of baseball, Babe Ruth.
The greatest athletic feat in the United States is to hit a home run. It's a wonderful moment where the ball goes off the playing field, and everything kind of stops and the guy gets to celebrate. And that really didn't exist before Babe Ruth.
In the late 20s and 30s, St. Louis general manager Branch Rickey developed the first modern farm system, where younger players gain experience before moving to the next level. December 7th, 1941. Japan attacks Pearl Harbor, forcing America to enter into World War II. As most players went off to fight in the war, Chicago Cubs owner Philip K. Wrigley formed the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League to help keep the game in the public eye. This all-girls professional league lasted from 1943 to 1954, as the end of the war allowed the major leagues to rebound. On April 15, 1947, the most historic event in baseball occurred when Jackie Robinson debuted for the Brooklyn Dodgers and broke the league's color barrier. Since the beginning of baseball, African Americans had not been allowed to play with whites, and had to instead form their own leagues, such as the Negro National League and the Negro American League. While he may not have been the best player in the Negro Leagues at the time, Robinson, talented, educated, and more importantly, with the emotional fortitude to handle the abuse, succeeded in the league. General Manager Branch Rickey of the Brooklyn Dodgers recognized this inner strength and signed him. While integration was slow-paced, black participation rose steadily to 27% by 1974.
There is no greater figure in terms of the impact on the social history in America than Jackie Robinson. In April 1947, when Jackie took the field for the Brooklyn Dodgers, not only did he break the color line of Major League Baseball, but he really broke the color line for mainstream America.
It's almost as if you say, if it costs my life, I'm willing to do it for the cause. And he did that. He was very articulate and I believe a great role model for African Americans, but not only for him, for all Americans. He was a great role model.
In 1953, the Major League Baseball Players Association was formed. The union was the first to survive more than a few years, and became successful after a few years of ineffectiveness. The union was also successful in creating the designated hitter rule to baseball, and in the creation of the free agency system. In 1958, the Brooklyn Dodgers and the New York Giants relocated to California, becoming the first teams to move across the Mississippi. These moves came with the growth of the cities in the West, and the new markets available to them, and ensured the league's reach throughout the entire country. The rise of television had the most impact on baseball, as revenue increased dramatically and teams attracted national audiences. Television created channels for sports, such as ESPN, and allowed fans to watch virtually every game from home. The new attention also brought on new attention to players, as for the first time ever, they had elevated to a superstar status.
3 balls and 2 strikes. The overshift is on, and Bassick deals. And Bonds hits one high. Hits it deep. It is out of here.
August 7th, 2007. Barry Bonds hits home run number 756, breaking Hank Aaron's all-time home run record. This mark is the defining moment of the steroids era. Before 2004, there is no penalty for the use of performance-enhancing drugs. However, the issue over the use of steroids began to attract significant attention in 1998, when Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire both broke Roger Maris's record for home runs in a single season. Since then, several dominant players have been found to use illegal performance-enhancing drugs, most recently, New York Yankees' Alex Rodriguez.
Back in the day, that was it. It was readily available. Guys at gyms talked about it. I think I believe it was the winter of '89 into '90. I was given a couple weeks worth, tried it, never thought anything of it.
Second, I don't know who's on third. You the manager? And then yes. You know the guy's name? I'm telling you their names. Well, who's on first? Yes. Well, go ahead and tell me. Who? The guy on first. Who? The guy playing first base. Who? The guy on first. Who is on first? What are you asking me for? I'm asking you.
Since its beginning, baseball has had a broad impact on the United States, both in culture and in sports. Baseball has given way to numerous award-winning films, literature, comedic sketches, and video games. Baseball also inspired the creation of baseball cards, collecting and trading cards of certain players, which is now extended to most sports. Baseball also inspired the first fantasy leagues, with the invention of rotisserie league baseball. However, the most prominent impact baseball has had on society is the baseball cap, which is now extended to different caps of different designs and logos throughout most of American culture. Today, baseball is played in many countries around the world, with the best competition playing in the major leagues. Currently, the major leagues consist of 30 teams across 2 leagues, the American League and the National League, with 15 teams in each. Teams play 162 games throughout the year, and the MLB, or Major League Baseball, brings in a yearly revenue of around $7 billion, with the average salary of a single player being around $2.5 million. The impact baseball has had on America is immense to an extent that no other sport can hope to achieve. Baseball has given America a profound influence in everyday society. Baseball's rich history encapsulates all of what is important to America. Many common everyday expressions come from baseball, such as 3 strikes and you're out, that one threw me a curveball, or he hit a home run.
American football has become one of the most popular sports in the world. However, it wasn't always the same sport that it is today. Over time, there have been many changes that have improved the sport, from the first paid players in small American clubs to leagues around the world. The evolution of the sport has been a fascinating and amazing journey. On November 6, 1869, the first intercollegiate game was played between Rutgers and Princeton. It was the first game that was played with the basic rules for football. Rutgers beat Princeton in this game, 6-4. Walter Camp was one of the most instrumental figures in the history of football. He was part of the original American Football Rules Committee and introduced many new rules to the game of football. In 1880, Walter Camp established the line of scrimmage, which is an imaginary line between the two teams separating an offense and a defense. It also marked the place of the ball before and after a play. In 1882, he established a rule that gave a team 3 plays to move the ball 5 yards for a first down. To many people, Walter Camp is known as the father of football because of the rules he developed and the effort he put into American football. The first professional football player was William Heffelfinger, also known as Pudge. He became classified as a professional and he was paid $500 to play in a game for the Pittsburgh Athletic Club on November 12, 1892. Soon after the first professional player was paid, the first professional game was played. It was on September 3, 1895. The 2 teams that participated in this game were the Latrobe YMCA and Jeannette Athletic Club. Even though these teams played the first professional game, they weren't around for long. The oldest continuously running franchise is the Arizona Cardinals. They started in 1899 as the Morgan Athletic Club. They later became the Chicago Cardinals, then moved to St. Louis, and are currently known as the Arizona Cardinals. Safety issues were a big problem in the early years of football. In 1905 alone, 19 players lost their lives while playing in games. Many people complained about these injuries and then wanted change. Several colleges even banned the game from being played on campus. So padding and helmets were invented and many players began to wear them for safety and protection. Rules were also changed to make the game safer. As the rules evolved for safety, other changes were implemented as well. In 1906, the forward pass was made legal, and a rule was enforced stating that 7 men had to be on the line of scrimmage when the ball was snapped. In 1920, the American Football Association was formed. Jim Thorpe was made the American Football Association's first president. He was made president during a meeting in 1920. No college players were allowed to play in the association. Also, for a team to join the league, there was a $100 entry fee. In 1921, the American Football Association had its first expansion for growth. Some teams joined in 1921, such as the Green Bay Packers. Then others in 1922, such as the Chicago Bears, making a total of 22 teams. Later in 1922, the American Football Association changed its name to the National Football League, or NFL. The expansion of football quickly spread beyond the professional level. Schools all over the nation started playing the game. In 1920, the National Federation of State High School Associations was formed, and it included the sport of football. By 1929, the first youth football conference was founded. It was called the Junior Football Conference. This league was renamed the Pop Warner Conference in 1933 after a man named Pop Warner, who at the time worked with many kids in the league.
Football continued to change, with the first ever NFL playoff game being held in 1932. The game was played between the 2 teams with the best records. These 2 teams were the Chicago Bears and the Portsmouth Spartans. The Bears won the game 9-0 and were crowned the first ever champion. College football had its own version of a playoff. It was called bowl games. Bowl games have always been a big part of college football. The first bowl game played was the Rose Bowl, and it was played in 1902. 33 years later, the Orange Bowl, Sugar Bowl, and Sun Bowl were also introduced as new bowl games. Shortly after the Orange Bowl, Sugar Bowl, and Sun Bowl were introduced, the Cotton Bowl was also introduced. The College Football League used rankings to determine who played in these bowl games. College football has been using rankings ever since 1869, but the Associated Press took over the job in 1936 and has been doing it ever since. Football had grown so popular that it began to be televised. The first televised college football game was in 1939 when Fordham University played Waynesburg College. 1 month later, the first professional football game appeared on television between the Brooklyn Dodgers and the Philadelphia Eagles. The addition of televised football allowed both the East and West Coasts to be able to watch each other's games and eventually become a financial stimulus to the sport. This footage is the oldest recorded footage of a college football game. As the NFL continued to grow, a ruling body became a necessity. The NFL started appointing commissioners in 1941 to govern the game. The NFL's first commissioner was Elmer Layden. He was commissioner for 5 years. Elmer Layden was replaced by Bert Bell as commissioner in 1946. After Bell's death in 1959, Pete Rozelle was elected the next commissioner. Pete Rozelle is credited with turning professional football into the successful product it has become today. What some people call the greatest game ever played on December 28, 1958 between the Baltimore Colts and the New York Giants in the league championship game. This was one of the first championship games to be televised nationally, and the Colts won. Almost 11 million homes nationwide watched this game, which made the NFL's popularity grow immensely. Many people say this was the day the NFL really earned its status. This is footage of what is considered the greatest game ever played. About 9 years after what was called the greatest game ever played was the first Super Bowl. The first Super Bowl was on January 15, 1967. The game was between the Green Bay Packers and the Kansas City Chiefs. The Packers won the game 35-10. The Super Bowl was originally called the championship game, but after 5 championship games, they changed the name to the Super Bowl. There were 2 basic football leagues, the American Football League and the National Football League. In 1966, the 2 leagues began talking about merging, and in 1970 they actually merged to form the National Football Conference and the American Football Conference. These 2 conferences make up what we now know as the National Football League, or NFL. When this league merged, there were 26 teams that made it up. As the NFL continued to grow in popularity, football started to spread around the world. On July 31st, 1982, 5 countries from Europe came together to make the American European Football Federation. Later, Switzerland, Netherlands, and Great Britain also joined the federation to make the league 8 teams. When this happened, the American European Football Federation changed their name to the European Football League. American football had not only grown its popularity in the United States, but was now an international giant in sport. The game of football has grown through the years and is considered the most popular sport in the United States and has spread throughout the world. The Super Bowl is one of the most watched events of every year, and the sport has become a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. Each year, the game continues to evolve through rule changes, safety improvements, communication outlets, and more. It has not only become a pastime, but a passion for the sports fans of America. Are you ready for some football?
We are the Bears, shuffling crew, shuffling on down, doing it for you. We're so bad, we know we're good, blowing your mind like we knew we would. You know we're just strutting for fun, strutting our stuff for everyone. We're not here to start no trouble, we're just here to do the Super Bowl show.
Well, they call me Sweetness, and I like to dance. Running the ball is like making more mans. We had the goal since training camp to give Chicago a Super Bowl champ. And we're not doing this because we're greedy. The Bears are doing it to feed the needy. We didn't come here to look for trouble. We just come here to do the Super Bowl show.
Basketball, one of the most popular sports in the U.S., has existed for a little more than a century. The original game, invented in 1891, had very different rules than the game we know today. The sport has grown from a recreational YMCA game to an international competitive sport for players of all ages. The history of basketball undoubtedly starts with Dr. James Naismith. Naismith was a Canadian teacher born in Ontario, Canada on the 16th of November, 1861. Naismith was orphaned early on in his childhood, and his uncle led him to study philosophy and trained him to become a priest. He graduated as a physician at McGill University in Montreal and was primarily interested in sports physiology. He later became a teacher at the International Young Men's Christian Association Training School in Springfield, Massachusetts. Massachusetts had very cold winters, and people wanted a game that could be played inside. In 1891, Luther Gillick and Frank Peters, chairman of the physical education department at the YMCA training facility, now Springfield College, approached Naismith and asked him to create a new indoor game in 14 days, which could be played during the cold winter months. Naismith also wanted to create a game that could be used to develop skill and that also wouldn't rely exclusively on strength, and that could be easily played by a class that he was teaching. He started work on it in December of 1891. James Naismith wrote that he took some ideas from other sports. After discarding the idea of adapting other games like soccer and lacrosse, he began to recollect on a game he played when he was young. He played with his friends a game called Duck on a Rock. Duck on a Rock was a game that combined tag and marksmanship. It is played by placing a somewhat large stone, known as a duck, upon a larger stone or a tree stump. One player stays near the stone to guard it. The other players throw stones at the duck in an attempt to knock it off the platform. Once it is knocked off, the throwers all rush to retrieve their stones. If a player is tagged before returning to the throwing line with his or her stone, they become the guard. The guard cannot tag anyone until he picks up a duck at his feet, nor can he chase anyone until he puts the original duck back up on its platform. It was this game that would later play such an important role in the origin of basketball. The first game was later played on December 21st of 1891. On December 21st, 1891, James Naismith explained a new game using 5 base ideas and 13 rules. That day, he asked his class to play a match in the court, 9 versus 9, using a soccer ball and 2 peach baskets. The goal was to score as many points as possible in 2 15-minute halves. The court length was only half the size of a present-day court, and dribbling, bouncing of the ball up and down while moving, was not part of the original game. Based on the rules, which are not similar today, we see how the first ever game turned out to be only 1-0. The man who made that first basket all the way from mid-court is named William Chase. Early basketball players such as William Chase were often referred to as cagers. The story behind that is that the first games were played with a chicken wire cage around the court to separate the players from the spectators. The story of the use of peach baskets is actually quite interesting. Naismith, who had outlined 13 original rules, dispatched the school's janitor to find 2 boxes to be fastened to the balcony railing at opposite sides of the gymnasium, where they would serve as goals. The school janitor, however, only found 2 half-bushel peach baskets, and the game was played with these. Someone proposed to call it Naismith ball, but he suggested, we have a ball in a basket, why don't we call it basketball? There were other differences between Naismith's first idea and the game played today. The peach baskets were closed and balls had to be retrieved manually by cutting a small hole in the bottom of the peach basket and poking the hole out using a stick. The peach basket was later replaced by a metal rim with a net hanging below, and in 1906 people began opening the net to let the ball fall through. The soccer ball was later replaced by a Spalding ball similar to the one used today. The sport was an instant success. Naismith's original 13 rules, the ball could be batted in any direction with one or both hands, but it could not be dribbled because players could not move with the ball. Beginning in 1910, a player could dribble the ball but could not shoot after dribbling. It was not until 1916, following heated debate, that players were allowed to shoot after dribbling. Throughout basketball's history, no part of the game has been more monitored than the act of fouling an opponent. In basketball's early days, a player's second foul would mean removal from the game until the next field goal was made. If a team committed 3 consecutive fouls, the opposition would be awarded a field goal. Beginning in 1894, players were given a free throw when fouled. Beginning in 1908, players who committed 5 fouls were disqualified from the game. Based on the severity of the foul, the rules were soon amended so that players were awarded either 2 shots or 1 shot plus a bonus shot, which was attempted only if the first shot was made. The rules also determined that an offensive player could commit a foul by playing too aggressively. Another interesting tidbit is that backboards were not always around either. They were later installed in the gymnasiums to keep meddling spectators from interfering with the ball on its way to the goal. Another addition to the game was a new ball that would replace the soccer ball, but it was also later replaced due to the fact that the laces of the ball holding the leather together were outside of the ball, so one could imagine dribbling would have been much harder than today. In 1892, Lithuanian-born physical education teacher Senda Berenson-Abbott introduced basketball to women at Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts. Because it was believed that Naismith's version of the game could be too physically demanding for women, Berenson-Abbott made the following changes to the game. The court was divided into 3 equal sections with players required to stay in an assigned area. Players were prohibited from snatching or batting the ball from the hands of another player, and players were prohibited from holding the ball for longer than 3 seconds and from dribbling the ball more than 3 times. Basketball's growth spread in the United States and abroad through young men's Christian associations and the armed forces and colleges. Due to its simple equipment requirements, indoor play, competitiveness, and easily understood rules, basketball gained popularity quickly. In May 1901, several schools, including Yale and Harvard universities and Trinity, Holy Cross, Amherst, and Williams colleges, formed the New England Intercollegiate Basketball League. The development of collegiate leagues and conferences brought organization and scheduling to competition, and formal league play created rivalries. More importantly, collegiate leagues became a critical training ground for officials. Naismith later became a medical doctor specializing in sports physiology and a Presbyterian minister. Naismith was able to see his beloved sport of basketball gain acceptance in numerous countries through the YMCA. The YMCA would be a very crucial component that would later allow news of this new revolutionary sport to be spread all over the world. In 1893, Mel Rideout arranged the first European match in Paris. At the same time, Bob Gailey went to Tientsin, China, Duncan Patton to India, Genzaburo Ishikawa to Japan, and C. Harik to Persia. Some of the very first professional teams had very intriguing names in my opinion. Just to list a few, there was the New York Renaissance, the New York Wanderers, although my personal favorite has to be the South Philadelphia Hebrew All-Stars. By the early 1900s, basketball was played at about 90 colleges, most of them located in the East and Midwest. In 1905, teams from the University of Minnesota and the University of Wisconsin traveled to New York to challenge Eastern League champion Columbia University. Columbia's Blue and White Five defeated both Midwestern teams, and the idea of an intercollegiate championship was born. By 1914, more than 360 colleges offered basketball, and the sport had spread heavily into the Midwestern states. The first national collegiate tournament was held in Kansas City, Missouri in 1937. The first professional league was founded in 1898. 6 teams took part in the National Basketball League, and the first champions were the Trenton Nationals, followed by the New York Wanderers, the Bristol Pile Drivers, and the Camden Electrics. The league was later abandoned in 1904, and the sport of basketball was eventually brought forth later at the Berlin Olympics in 1936.